Bonjour, bonjour, mes amis. I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon, this evening, depends on the time zone. There might even be a few people who are here in the morning. We are going to be discussing all things sleep today. So I want to welcome my panelists, who I know have a lot of thoughts, unsleepy thoughts on this. Dr. Steady, Justin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here. This is such an important topic. I hope everybody's well rested and I hope everybody has their Aura rings on airplane mode for a minute so that we can discuss sleep and how it all goes. This is such an important thing because it's like one of the key regulators of anabolic processes in the body. And I think that when
Mhm.
you dive into
Mhm.
some of the more generic advice out there, it's like, all right, turn your phone off. We know that, right? You can use melatonin, and some people will have this just kind of baseline advice. But when you really dive into the genetic piece, you realize that there's a lot going on, right? There's gut health to consider, there's cortisol response to
Yeah.
consider, there's vitamin D to consider. It's a really well rounded topic. And that's why we look to the genes, and that's what we're going to be diving into tonight. And I'm looking forward to doing it with you guys. Dr. Tracy, good to see you here as well.
Likewise, always fun to be here.
Yeah. So why don't Justin, why don't we kind of jump off of what you started with and the statement of, I think between the three of us, we agree categorically that sleep's profoundly important for everything health and mood and enjoyment and focus and concentration. But it also tends to be one of these very tricky things to achieve if you're struggling with it. And there's probably more advice than not on ways to get sleep, and yet people still struggle with that. So let's talk a little bit about why people are struggling with sleep, and why, even though there's probably a lot of information on the internet and through doctors, not all of it's working.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to dive in right away on like what I think some of the more low-hanging fruit is I really think there's a bigger problem going on here with cortisol dysregulation, modern day. Because really, if you
Mm,
think about it, I mean, melatonin and cortisol, they kind of counteract one another. And I mean, how many people are exposed to things that raise their cortisol in the PM that perhaps our ancestors weren't? I mean, I'm sure now and again they would have had a predator or something like that that would have spiked that cortisol in the PM. But for us, it's so common because any amount of blue light will, in fact, get that cortisol response. Or maybe you have like a GI pathogen that you don't know about, and your body's just sensing the stress, right? And it's creating
mm,
cortisol in the PM. As soon as that cortisol goes up, understand that one of its mechanisms is to cause the liver to release glucose, right? Like it
mm,
gives you blood sugar. That's part of how it works. So you're there, you are trying to get a good night's sleep, but effectively you have a sugar high because something is creating cortisol in the middle of the night, and that's going to directly downgrade your melatonin production. And there's so many little stressors nowadays that really can cause that response. So I think that's a pretty big one. Um,
yeah.
Dr. Steady, what do you think beyond that? Like, what would be your kind of next go-to there?
Well, to sort of extend what you were saying, that's also where things like what we're eating and when at night can
Mhm.
really make a big difference. If blood sugar goes up, cortisol is going to go up, and it's this whole loop that we can get into. And
Mm.
alcohol. I don't, I don't want to be like the party pooper over here, but I had to say it. I
That's
had
okay.
to.
The young generation is all with you. The young generation doesn't drink
That's
in the
so
same way
so
that,
so
yeah.
I hear. Yeah. So they're in full support. Things come back around. So those are two things that I would add to the cortisol at night picture that and some people because of their genetics, their stress hormones may be more intense, not necessarily cortisol, but some of the other ones. And so just being mindful that when a cascade happens, some people can clear that less quickly than others, and knowing that and knowing how to sort of make lifestyle changes around that can be really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've heard, what I'm surmising is there's an element of it, it's death by a thousand cuts. And so this one obvious for some people maybe, but for most people, there's not this one obvious thing that is preventing sleep. There's not a cat who's bugging you all night long. Instead, it's going to be a lot of little things. So maybe not eating properly, especially aligned with your genes, or maybe very sensitive to stress and not managing that stress well. So it's kind of across the board. It's several different things as opposed to kind of one flaming gun or one flaming kitty.
Yeah, and that's why it's all an alignment process, right? That's why I always bring that up because it's like you could be on the best possible diet, you could have a lot of things going for you, but just that one thing that you didn't know about, right? So like
Hmm.
for example, I mean, let's say you are on the right diet, let's say you've got your rhythms on point as far as you're exercising in the morning and you've got your blue light blockers in the evening and you're drinking your magnesium and all these great things, but maybe you don't know that you have a problem with liver congestion. Or maybe
Mm.
you don't know that you have some level of leaky gut and it's causing dysbiosis, and that dysbiosis is interfering with your melatonin production, right? I mean, that's an interesting concept that melatonin is made mostly in your gut. And how many people are running around with issues like that? And that's why we recommend doing like the Gut 360 test, for example, because we want to see what those pathogenic species look like. And any and all of these things can be contributors to issues with your sleep. And I think that's why diagnostic testing is one of the best things you can do. Because let's identify what the heck it is that's actually causing the disruption in the first place. And it's not just that there's sirens in the distance or something disrupting it on that visceral kind of superficial level.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'd like where I want to at least start diving into personalization that genes can offer us and how knowing our genes can influence what sleep strategies we have, both to get what we need to sleep as well as what we should be avoiding to sleep. But before I do go there, audience, I will also offer, we're not really going to dive into some more pathologic reasons as to why you may not be getting sleep. So, for example, those with Lyme disease or its co-infections, sleep might be a casualty of that. Those with going through menopause, perimenopause, sleep may be a casualty of that. And there's a lot of specified information there. So we will toss into the chat a few of those things that touch on those subjects, but we're really going to be focusing on sleep tonight and genes that directly influence sleep. And so if you think your struggle sits outside of this, make sure you reach out to your provider because they'll probably be that first good step to help identify what's preventing sleep and what can be done. All right, audience. So we'll toss in some webinar links into the chat a little bit later. So, Dr. Steady, what's one of the first genes that you think of or that you kind of evaluate? If you have someone that's coming to you, otherwise unremarkable health, none of the things I've just mentioned, what are some of the genetic considerations that you're looking at?
Well, I have a whole list. So where would I start necessarily? Well, our our mood and behavior genes are the first ones that come up on reports. So I guess I'll start there. And what I think of when I think of this is myself and and my wonderful stepchildren who I love. And they had this habit of like waiting until just before I was ready to go to bed to bring up something stressful. And I'd be like all sleepy and cozy. And then they would say something. And so I have a deletion in my ADRA2B and my COMT is slow. And so when my norepinephrine would get going, then it would be slow to clear. Husband passed out, kids asleep, me awake, ruminating. So that's one of the places that I think about is and then I had to learn how to minimize and be like, before you say that, can it wait till morning? Because I might not be able to go to sleep if you're going to go there. And the same thing, Justin and I were talking before about scary movies
Yeah.
or, just contentious conversations or even, reading that one last work email at 10
Mm.
p.m. and then thinking about what you might need to, which also, depending on your BDNF, could also could also set off a whole other thing of rumination and
Yeah.
not being able to stop thinking. I could keep going probably for the rest of the hour. So I'll take a pause there, but I have the rest of my list. So when you need to come back to me, I'm ready.
All right, Justin, I think that means tag your it. What are some of the first genes that you'll look at in an otherwise unremarkable patient?
Definitely the first place to start. I'm completely in agreement as far as the executive function profile. And just to elaborate a little bit on what Dr. Steady said there, is that the ADRA2B gene that represents the noradrenaline receptor. And when you have deletions in there, it really represents an inability to process noradrenaline, right? So if you've got that gene and you've got Ds in your genotype, it means that there's partial deletion. If you have two different Ds, which is what I have, it's completely deleted, and you're going to have a lot of difficulty there with regard to dealing with like stressful situations. You're way more likely to be that ruminator. And when she mentioned COMT is what methylates and then clears the noradrenaline, right? So if you've
Mhm.
got like a longer version of that COMT, it means that now
Mhm.
that thought process is going to really stick around a lot longer. So that can be really problematic. And that means that anxiety may well be one of the root causes of your insomnia or your issues with sleeping. I'm also one of the people that really looks at the vitamin D profile as well for that. I think that
Mm.
vitamin D matters a lot for your circadian rhythm because, of course,
Mm.
it does, right? Think about it. Like, that's the sunshine vitamin, it's actually a hormone. But if you have like a really slow delivery or slow acceptance of vitamin D, and let's say you were to take it too late in the supplement
Mhm.
format, it's going to be like 11 p.m. by the time that it actually gets its
Mhm.
way into the receptor. And that's going to tell your body, like an actual epigenetic signal, that, hey, it's daytime and it's not time to go to sleep yet.
Mm.
Right. And we have a whole profile about that. We have three different genes that we look at. The first one is the conversion of D2 into D3. Then there's the delivery mechanism, which takes it to the receptor site. And then the receptor site itself is a genetically encoded phenomenon as well called VDR, the vitamin D receptor. So those latter two genes there, if those are suboptimal, it means it takes forever for the vitamin D to get
Mm.
into the receptor. So just, inappropriate vitamin D supplement timing is another thing that I really look at when
Mm.
it comes to the genes. We get really specific protocols when it comes to vitamin D timing because of those two latter genes. Um, Dr. K, what's next? I mean, there's so many different ways you can take this one.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of stress sensitivity and I like the idea of vitamin D because vitamin D does everything. It's that happy little polymath in the body. I'd also want to take a moment because I'm seeing this a little bit in the comments to talk about the clock gene. Because it's beautifully aptly named. Scientists are super creative, and I'm grateful for us. So, audience, when it was first explored, maybe 20 years ago, I could be lying, somewhere in that space. It was thought to be this panacea of, oh, this is going to tell us everything about our circadian rhythm. And it's not the only one, but it tends to be a major one. And so, if you have an optimal presentation of your clock gene, what this means is that you are someone that is more easily able to have a circadian rhythm. And as we talk about sleep, audience, one thing that's really important to think about when you're thinking about circadian rhythm, I think a lot of people think about it in terms of waking up and falling asleep. Those are 2 points in that rhythm. Remember that there's a lot of hormones that flow in between to connect those 2 points, both during the day and during the night, right? And both Dr. Steady and Justin have talked about noradrenaline. We'll talk about cortisol and melatonin, et cetera. So that's part of that happy little rhythm. And so, one of the bigger things that clock does is really how are you able to have a consistent, smooth flow of that rhythm? And importantly, when disturbed in some way, and I'll define that, how quickly can you recover from that? Right. So, disturbing might mean you've changed time zones. Disturbing may mean Dr. Study's case, she has a stepchild waking her up at 3 in the morning because they want to contemplate life, right? There's many different variations of disturbing, but the question with this is, those with the optimal presentation of clock are going to have a little bit easier time recovering from that compared to someone with a suboptimal, right? And so it means that they have an easier time. It doesn't mean that if you're suboptimal, you can't create this circadian rhythm. It just means you're much more sensitive to disruption and you need to plan for it. So, for example, I have a suboptimal clock. It makes me a night owl, very happily so. But it means when I travel, I put in a lot more buffer time to adjust to where I'm going because it takes me a long beat to get there. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
clock tends to be one of my, yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, Dr. K. I was going to just say, because you got me all worked up talking about clock, because that really speaks to the holistic nature of this, right? It's like, I'm not a fan of when people talk about genes in this N equals one format. Like, we
Mm,
got all these genes and all of these different physiological processes, but the clock gene is the one that we talk about with regard to the regulation of circadian rhythm.
mhm,
But really take into account everything that we just said. That's one more mover there, right? So
mhm.
like, you can have an optimal clock gene, but that doesn't mean you're going to have ideal sleep rhythms, because you might have all these other things going on,
Yeah.
right? Serotonin disruption and deletions in ADRA2B and improper vitamin D genes, improper, detoxification genes. These all matter. I also have a suboptimal clock gene, and to me it's just like, all right, this is one more thing that I've got to be
Mhm.
on point and regulate. And when I work with people who have suboptimal clock, I get really like, okay, there's a few just like master strategies that we got to pretty much
Yeah.
have on point on a day-to-day basis. I know we're going to get into some strategies after we do the poll, which we haven't forgot about, by the way. But when you have suboptimal clock, just know that it means that you have to have certain alignment processes in place. Like, I do the horizon gazing in the AM and the PM. I really time my exercise now as well. So I have like a
Mm.
catabolic session in the morning, which is, weight training, boxing, etc. And then in the evening, I nourish that anabolic side with more of a stretching routine. Right. So even
Mm.
the way that you work out can help to nourish these rhythms. And you need to make sure that you're on point if clock is suboptimal.
Yeah.
And I'd like to throw out there that also this is where the food timing can come in, and
Mhm.
especially if you have something going on in your AME1 gene,
Mm.
because then you're digesting those starches down lower in the gut. It doesn't start in your mouth. If you have
Mhm.
a presentation where you have um, fewer copies of this, and so that's when you're going to get that spike in blood sugar is going to be later than someone else who can start breaking it down earlier. And so that can also affect your circadian rhythm.
Yeah, I wonder, Dr. Study, if you can. So within the comments, I saw someone mention that they wake up a lot around 3 to 4, and there are many different reasons that you can be waking up between 3 and 4. But one of them, for some people, is poor blood sugar regulation. So can we talk a little bit about how blood sugar regulation is going to contribute to that, especially because I think Amy one bringing up in relation to this conversation of one of the reasons because so many people wake up at that glorious little 3 to 4 hour range.
And so let's say someone eats not very long before they go to bed, and then suddenly their blood sugar goes up. That could wake them up, or when it goes back down, that could
Hmm.
also wake them up. Because a lot of times, especially if there's a significant spike, if there's a significant drop, that the body is just trying to regulate
Hmm.
all the time. And a lot of people have no trouble falling asleep if they eat right before bed. It's the wake up that gets them. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm falling asleep fine. My stomach's not too full. I have this conversation a lot, in case you can't tell. And I have to explain that the waking up later can also be from eating too close to bedtime. And it's
Hmm.
what we're kind of going for is more even blood sugar. And so knowing one's genetics, if you have an increased risk for type 2 diabetes, if you're breaking down your starches lower in your gut, like all of these little pieces really
Yeah.
can make a big difference in terms of guiding.
Hmm.
How do I eat? When do I eat? What do I eat? Those are some questions that get answered in our reports, and
Yeah.
I think that can be really helpful information in terms of wake ups. So I don't know the age of the person who asked the question in the comment. I don't know if there are hormonal
Mhm.
things compounding this, or if maybe
Yeah.
if that could just if it could be as simple as blood sugar management. But that is definitely
Yeah.
something that to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, and I think this too a little bit ties in serotonin, which we haven't talked too much about, because you made the statement of, and I wonder if Justin, you can explore this a little bit. Some people will eat before bed in part because it helps them sleep, and part of that is carbohydrate in the gut enable creation of serotonin, melatonin, kind of that happy little cascade. And so some people will naturally reach for these things in order to enable sleep, even though it may, for some people, again, be counterproductive later on in the evening. Justin, do you want to talk a little bit around this?
Yeah, serotonin is an interesting one. And once again, one of these things that's made in the gut, right? So I'm a harp on it. Gut health is really important for your sleep, and you need to make sure that you're nourishing that. Serotonin is pretty interesting because when you have dysregulation there, and we can actually point to it a couple fold, right? Because we can look at the gut, and then we can also look at genes like 5-HTT-LPR, which represents the actual receptor site for the serotonin. And when someone's dysregulated, one of the more interesting things that happens is that they tend to have this personality trait of being like hyper noticing of stuff, right? Like they get, frankly, it manifests as irritability, right? But it's like because they're able to actually pick up on a lot of little details. Like we see a lot of really just hyper detailed people that have what's called S's in their 5-HTT-LPR gene. So that represents a shorter receptor
Mhm.
site. So if you think about it, if you're trying to sleep and your brain, because you have dysregulated serotonin, your brain is noticing all kinds of stuff, right? Like that little bit of light bleeding in through the window, or that noise in the distance, or down the hall in the apartment building, someone's cooking, and your brain is just like on, right? Like your brain is almost too, detail oriented to let you sleep. And I think that it represents kind of an ancestral mechanism there, where in our ancestors' days, somebody had to get up and somebody had to
Mhm.
check for, smoke in the distance or that rustling in the bushes or whatever it is. So someone had to get up and do that. But now the trickle down effect in 2025 is really that
Right.
someone who has dysregulated serotonin is just more on. Their brain has a little bit more difficulty shutting off. So for those people, you have to really make sure that that sleep architecture is proper, right? You have to make sure
Mm.
that your body is actually able to like give you all of the right signals and not have reasons to be on, not have reasons to perceive a threat. This really ties into the ADRA2B gene as well, right? Because it's like if you're already an anxious person due to those deletions and then you're
Mhm.
dysregulated for serotonin, that's going to be a pretty sizable problem. There's another secondary mover there called TPH2, which is really important because that gene is involved with the catalyzation, the breaking down of serotonin. Let's say you have a dysregulation already in the receptor, and then you have a form of TPH2 that breaks it down at a more rapid rate. Well, now we've got even less serotonin availability, so that makes it more likely that you're that much more dysregulated.
Yeah.
I want to
Wonderful.
throw out there that in terms of sleep hygiene, BDNF also, I read a study that says that it's harder for people who don't make as much to get into slow wave sleep. And so, wanting to minimize light and sound and all of those things so that you can get there and have that
Mhm.
really deep restorative sleep, it could also be that could be another gene where you want to really keep your environment uh, pretty tight, so to speak.
Yeah, when I was initially being trained on genetics by Dr. Mansour, this is hyperbole audience, but I think it still serves its purpose. He used to say that if you have suboptimal BDNF and before bed you're exposed to a lot of stimuli, short of a horse tranquilizer, you're not getting to sleep. And again, it serves doctor study to your point, and this tends to be one of my litmus tests if people haven't gotten their genes done. Before bed, if I was to play an accordion for you and shock you, how's that going to help out your sleep? And my poor BDNF categorically are going to be like, I would never sleep again. So I wonder if we can jump into the poll, Vanny or Katie, if you wouldn't green audience. We show up every night to ensure that we're serving you. So we always ask or offer a poll so that we can understand what you're trying to learn here this evening so that we can support that end. So I'm just going to share the responses to this poll. So the first question we have is, how often do you have trouble falling or staying asleep? Um, Unfortunately, and I suppose there's some selection bias here, almost half our audience is saying almost every night, with another quarter of the audience saying a few nights a week. So, mon Dieu. And I think, audience, unfortunately, you kind of reflect statistics there. I think most people within the US and Canada and North America at least struggle with this. And I speculate that Europe and Asia are kind of quickly on the on the uptake of this. I don't know the numbers for South America or Africa or Australia, the other continents. The next question we asked is, have you tried melatonin and other sleep supplements? Um, a majority of people, majority, interestingly, of people have said yes, they've tried, but they only sometimes see results. So perhaps either a mismatch between the supplement and what's causing it, or there being several different factors that are causing the insomnia. But beautifully, another portion of the audience, about 30%, is saying that they have, and they have helped. The next question we asked is, have you tried to improve your, or how have you tried to improve your sleep? And a majority of the audience is talking about sleep hygiene, which is wonderful because that's at the very base of it all. With the next element here, Dr. Steady, you'd be happy to hear this. Actually, and Justin, too, meditation or relaxation exercises. With another fair portion of the audience saying over the counter supplements as well. The next question we asked is, have you explored the genetics of your sleep for insight? A lot of the audience, interestingly, is saying no, about 50% saying they haven't tried that yet. So, audience, hopefully, as we go through this, you can hear how your genes can be really powerful in guiding your sleep strategies. And I appreciate that we're probably powering through a few of the genes quickly. But when you do get your 360, what you will be given access to is a portal that explains everything that we've been talking today about, as well as your presentation. So if you're not catching it here, don't worry. A, we have replays, but B, separate to that, when you get your report, it's beautifully detailed in there. All right. The last question that we asked the audience is, what is the biggest sleep challenge you have right now? And 50% of the audience is saying staying asleep. So Dr. Steady, Justin, as we kind of go through things, let's also focus on staying asleep, because another 20% of the audience is saying they're also waking up too early. So arguably kind of same in the sense of either middle of the night or too early in the morning, with the next biggest portion of the audience saying they're just not feeling rested in the morning. So perhaps they're actually clocking those hours, but those hours don't feel good. Cough, cough, BDNF folk in the room. All right. So I wonder, I wonder if we again dig into some very gene specific strategies. So far we've talked a little bit about, if you're looking at mood and behavior, if you know your ADRA or your 5-HTP, you know kind of the stress response. If you know your clock or your vitamin D, you know ways and like kind of chronotypes that you might be, that morning person versus that night owl. Um, and then we've also talked a little bit about diet, right? And especially carbohydrate. What are some other sections of the report that kind of come to your mind when we're thinking about this? When any other section of the report that we want to dig into? And our report says something about an environment or a body environment grade. I wonder if we dive into that.
I'll transition a little bit to detoxification genes
Yeah.
here. I think that that's really relevant. And the reason why is because we know that that's when your body does a lot of its detoxification is while you're sleeping, right? So another area that I kind of dive into with clients is like, let's look at your glutathione pathways, because if that's suboptimal, then that's, a likely contributor there. And I think all three of the genes that we look at with that are of relevance. Like, for example, we have the GSTP1 gene, and that's really associated with detoxification at the level of the respiratory tract. And I'll tell you, having a good quality air filter in your bedroom is one of the low hanging fruit things that I recommend for people, because that represents like an epigenetic input that your body has to deal with, right? If there's toxins, if there's mold, if there's pet dander and all these kinds of things in your room and you're breathing it in while your body's trying to detoxify itself, it might not necessarily wake you up, but it's probably going to manifest as just not getting into those deeper states of sleep. So sometimes it's a matter of really having that as part of your sleep architecture, and sleep hygiene is making sure that you have good quality air that you're breathing in throughout the night. But if you have suboptimal GSTP1, it makes it that much more valuable because you're not detoxing well, right? Those little alveoli, they're not detoxing before it actually gets into your circulation. It doesn't have that line of defense with glutathione there. So that's of a lot of relevance there. And then also the GSTT1, That's all to do with liver detoxification. And I'm telling you, if you have a gummed up liver, it's going to make it harder for your body to get into those deeper states of sleep as well, because it's going to impact things like thyroid health. It's going to impact things like digestion, detoxification. This is a really important thing, right? So if you've got anything less than 2 copies of GSTT1, you'll see that in your glutathionization reports, then to me, that represents a potential sleep disruptor because your liver may not be doing its job. And I recommend getting your liver enzymes looked at, maybe getting urinary bile acids looked at to really see if there's liver congestion going on there. The third one is of complete relevance as well because it's GSTM1, and that's to do with gut, all about gut detox. So, we already mentioned melatonin and serotonin are both made in your gut, not to mention many, many other neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. So if you have any kind of gut dysbiosis, leaky gut, just issues going on there, it's going to impact your sleep. I'm telling you right now, neurotransmitter production is very much dependent on how that gut is looking. So for us, right, this is a copy number variation. And if you have 0 copies of GSTM1, like yours truly, or if you have 2 copies of GSTM1, it can really represent a predisposition for dysbiosis and issues at the level of the gut. So shoring up your detox processes is definitely one of those places I would go towards for your sleep quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. An audience, one thing we have done within the sleep report is offered you something called a body environment grade. And what this really speaks to is all those, the detox processes that Justin just went through. It kind of gives a really rough grading saying you're strong with regards to detox or not so much. And that can give you a bit of an insight as to whether this might be an area where you'd want to focus on. Yeah. Dr. Steady, I saw a thought percolating there. Do you have anything to, well, I know you have many things to add, but what specifically?
Well, specifically to that, it was actually a Chinese medicine thing, which is that the Chinese clock from 1 to 3 is about
Mm,
liver. And so
mhm,
just kind of throwing that out there, do with that what you will. The Chinese liver, not is in the country, but the Chinese medicine liver, and the Western medicine liver are not the same, but
mhm.
they are related. So just kind of
Yeah.
throwing that out there. And I was doing some reading about different micronutrients that have to
Mhm.
do with sleep. And,
Mm,
vitamin B12, which also
mhm,
gets absorbed in the gut. And if you can't
mhm,
do that well, that's also not great. And if you really can't absorb it for a long time, so long that you get vitamin B12 deficiency anemia, it's actually implicated in narcolepsy. And I thought that was fascinating. Like
mm.
that specific, no one really was complaining of narcolepsy in the poll, but I just thought I'd throw it out there because I thought it was interesting and I like
Yeah.
to go down little rabbit holes when I'm doing my research. So, but zinc
Yeah.
and vitamin C, which we also have reports on, were also pieces of the puzzle in terms of sleep that there's more research being done on. And so
Interesting.
figuring out what your genes are, whether or not you can bind, absorb, and transport vitamin C could end up being important. Do you need to take more of it
Yeah.
because of that? Or if you take more of it, is it not really going to do all of that much for your sleep? These are the kinds of things that we can discuss. In vitamin D, as Justin had already mentioned, but it helps both with for the people who are either having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep and sleep
Mhm.
duration. So it kind of does all three
Mm,
of those
mm.
in terms of when they kind of broke it down by like more likely for sleep apnea and things like that. Vitamin D was just
Interesting.
everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah. So to me, that's interesting because I think we've talked about several things, many of them external. This stressful thing that happens before you go to sleep, this delightful sugary thing that you eat before bed, or perhaps the mold or, whatever environmental thing. But what I'm also hearing, another one of these cuts, less obvious in that it's a low grade malnutrition of certain vitamins, so B12, D, or perhaps minerals, the zincs and the coppers and all the fun things of the world. But these sorts of things, because body doesn't have effectively um, the building blocks to create a good body environment, it's going to struggle to have that good sleep. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So it's one of those things that like there's very much going to be an element of playing detective And knowing genes as to knowing where you could be most susceptible can be really helpful.
Yeah, it makes sense. And again, the holistic nature of this, like it could be one of these items that we're
Hmm.
discussing, it could be all of these items that we're
Yeah.
discussing. And we have, little protocols that we lay out for each one, right? Like, for example, anyone that has the deletions in ADRA2B, like I'm a big fan of, we have a product called Deep Calm Optimizer, and it's got one of my favorite ingredients on planet Earth on it. It's got kava in there, right? Which is a really
Hmm.
useful ingredient. Like Dr. Steady mentioned alcohol, and alcohol operates on the GABA pathway, but there's obvious downsides to alcohol, right? The toxicity, and you don't want to gum up your liver. That's not going to help with the sleep component. But kava is a really interesting ingredient because it actually also operates on the GABA pathway, right? And GABA is a
Hmm.
very important neurotransmitter. It helps you to get into those deeper states of sleep, helps you to relax. And kava is one of those things that does that. So our deep calm is very useful ingredient list. It's got a lot of other stuff
Hmm.
other than just kava in there, but it's like, again, once we've highlighted and identified a genetic red flag, well, then we have a little toolkit that we use to sort of
Yeah.
manage the expression of that. And to me, that's the name of the game. It's really just understanding these are the genes, these are the epigenetic inputs that we can provide to make sure that we're getting
Hmm.
better expression. And that alone goes a really long way once you have your DNA 360.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing kind of one of your sleep supports, or at least one thing that you work with people is supplements, right? So there's kind of the make sure body is sufficient supplements, vitamin D and B12, etc. But those that you don't necessarily need sufficiency in. So for example, kava, right? Those are things that can be layered on and added in to support sleep, especially during tricky periods where sleep is going to be harder to come by. Yeah, because I would offer, I think one thing we'd really want, I would like discussed and made aware of is that people just based on the nature of life, yay life, there's always struggling to sleep, and that tends to be situational, right? And so having a toolkit for situational loss of sleep is helpful, but it's once it becomes chronic that it becomes a problem. Dr. Steady, what's your thoughts? If you could give the audience some pointers of at what point do you kind of think it comes into that chronic space where you should be going to a doctor or healthcare provider in order to get support, in order to get a little bit more differentiation to ensure it's not just, momentary life circumstance or something that you can fix with sleep hygiene and some of the things that we've discussed tonight.
Well, I also something that just occurred to me also is that sometimes our perception of sleep is more
Mm,
or less accurate, and so actually having measurements. Sometimes
mm,
I wake up and my various gizmos that I've used to track my sleep over the years are like, "You got terrible sleep," and I feel awesome. And then sometimes I'm like, "I only slept 10 minutes last night. I know it." And it's like, "You got 8 hours. Good job." And so having an awareness that depending on a bunch
yeah.
of different things, how your perception of it and how it actually is can be different
Hmm.
is and that we like more data at the DNA
Yeah.
company is just something that I want to start out with. But
Yeah.
if you're just not feeling well rested when you
Hmm.
wake up, I think, and that goes on for more than a couple of weeks, I would go talk to
Hmm.
somebody because I would be like, something has shifted for me. Now,
Yeah.
whether that's somebody, whether you know that you're under a lot of stress and that somebody is a mental health professional, or whether that somebody is a functional medicine doctor, or who it is, depends on your
Hmm.
circumstances, obviously. But I wouldn't let it go too long because the effects of not sleeping well are can
Hmm.
be not great and they compound over time. You know what I mean? The longer that
Yeah.
you don't sleep well, it's not like you can then just sleep for a week and you're fine,
Hmm.
right? That's just not
Yeah.
how the body tends to work. So
Yeah.
that's I also am pretty sensitive to not sleeping, so that's the longest I would go. Maybe other
Yeah.
people would be like, "Oh, I would wait 6 months," but that's just not how
Yeah.
I roll because I really like my sleep.
Yeah. Here's a fun tidbit for the audience and some ProStar sleep tips. Your perception of how you slept is correlated to which stage of sleep you wake up within. So, to your point, you can get a solid 8 hours, but if you're woken up in the middle of a deep sleep, you're going to be cranky and feel unrested all day compared to even if you just get one short sleep cycle in, but you wake up in that more superficial period. then you're still going to feel great. And so, audience, if you're someone in particular that's sensitive to being woken up, there's a lot of different alarms that can kind of there. It's wearable technology, and the wearable technology will track where you are in your sleep stages, and you will set a range. It says, "Hey, I need to wake up tomorrow between 6 and 6:30." And what it will do is starting at 6, it'll start monitoring for that optimal point to wake you up. And if to wake you up at 6:30, hence the range, but ideally it's going to wake you up in that half an hour where you're in a lower point or like a lighter phase of sleep so that you wake up actually feeling refreshed. So audience, something to consider if you're like Dr. Steady where your technology is saying like you slept 8 hours and you did spectacular and you're like, but I don't feel that way. That's a little bit of a tip and trick there.
Yeah, it's really important not to compound the issue, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you do feel good, and it's very interesting you brought that point up because I feel the same way with that Dr. Steady, where it's like I wake up and I'm like, yeah, let's go. Like I'm ready to go for the day. And I look and my aura ring tells me
Yeah.
I'm supposed to feel like shit. It's like it's
Yeah.
really important not to nourish that in that moment
Yeah.
because you will compound the issue. And it's like really, I almost take my numbers as, with a grain of Himalayan sea salt, right? Because it's like you don't want to
I
allow
adore
that to
Justin.
show your mind that okay, today we are supposed to feel good and today we are supposed to feel bad. You got to make yourself feel good regardless, right? But it's like it's
Mhm.
very important to have that metric still. It's a really important thing to measure it because that way if the interventions that you've actually put in place are moving the needle or not. And to your guys'
Mhm.
point there, as far as the kind of cascade, like it's almost a chicken or the egg thing when it comes to health problems, right? Because if you start to get really poor sleep, to me, that's an indicator that something in the body is wrong. But then the poor sleep
Mhm.
is making it so that something in the body is wrong, right?
Mhm.
Like the more you go with poor sleep, it's going to up your cortisol. Your cortisol is going to start to compromise your gut. It'll, in and of itself, cause like histamine and TNF alpha and some of these pro inflammatory cytokines to be released. It's going to suppress secretory IgA, and that's going to allow for more pathogens and things to work their way into your gut. Then there's gut dysbiosis, and that is going to compromise your sleep. Right. So you can see that this just goes around and around, right? We need to make sure that we don't have, you know, some sort of cascade that's going to create immune issues and all kinds of things. So, like, if it's a real
Yeah.
problem and it's beyond a few nights, you need to start addressing it as soon as possible because it's only going to go
Mhm.
downhill from there. And I want to create an upward spiral in people. I'm not interested in seeing a downward spiral in people. So, sleep is such an important pillar of your health. It can't be
Yeah.
emphasized enough.
Yeah. I wonder, so I'm seeing within the questions answers a beautiful long listing, so I want to jump to those soon. But before we do that, um, both of you have wonderful experience and awareness of Techuticals. Techuticals meaning technology that you kind of use as a suitical, like a supplement, I love new words. And then Dr. Seti, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about maybe your favorite device that can support better sleep?
I would love to do that because I'm a geek when it comes to biohacking
You
tech
are.
and gadgetry and all these kinds of things because it's kind of fun. It's like, you know what it is? When you get sober, like I've been sober for like 6 years, and it's like you kind of end up reaching to different stuff to just turn some dials. So I like messing with supplements. I like messing with tech. Like instead of going out and drinking, it's like I'll just, go in my sauna and do a breath work session in there, and I'll kind of get a little buzz that way, but it's given me positive effects and benefits instead. So for me, I think that may be where it comes from. But with regard to tech, I've landed on a few things that are really beneficial and that have been pretty like repeatable for me. Um, I know that I've talked about this before, but Brain Tap is fantastic. Like I really like the fact that I can just like trigger a meditative state with really just letting technology do all the work for
Mm.
me. Because I'm not one of those people, right? Like I have deletions in ADRA2B. I'm too up and I'm too crazy in type A to be able to like sit down and do some actual meditation. But Brain Tap, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, it's a headset. It's got photobiomodulation that goes in the eyes, it goes in the ears. It has these really complex binaural beats that play in the background. And then it's also got these meditation tracks that play once your brain has been sort of pulled into a really receptive state for the meditations. right?
Mm.
So it's one of those, like, it doesn't ask permission. You just press play and it does its thing. And 1 to 3 sessions a day on that brain tap, I'm telling you, it goes a really long way. And I try to do one right before bed as well, because it helps pull your brain into that
Mm.
theta and that delta state, which really represents, the ability of your body to detoxify and get into the sleep stages. Sorry. So brain tap is one of my favorites. Dr. Steady, I know you got a handful of them that you love.
I must talk about the Apollo Neuro.
Mm.
Um, I don't just use it at night. I also use it during the day, or I may or may not have it on now. You'll never know. But one of the things that I like about it in wearing it at night is that it senses, it has a way of sensing if I move. And so
Mm.
before I've even fully woken up, it'll start doing its thing. And it uses
Mm.
different vibrations, they call them vibes, to provide just enough stimulation that it's sort of supposed to mimic like a reassuring, hand on your
Mm.
arm or something, or your leg or something like that, like more of an oxytocin pathway, I think, is my understanding
Mm.
of it. So it's calming, and the fact that I don't have to look at my phone to get it to turn back on in the middle of the night, so that I don't have to look at the blue light, that it just does its thing without me having to do anything, I think is fabulous. And it
Mm.
has different settings for different types of things. So I like that one.
I love that. Both of you on your way to being cyborgs. It makes me very happy. All right. Um, so I want to jump into some of the questions. Before I do, any parting thoughts for our audience before we transition into questions? Was there a gene we didn't cover? Was there a supplement we didn't cover? Anything that you think we should add before we transition out?
Did we mention sleep optimizer or just the deep?
Oh, I just mentioned Deep Calm, but yeah, by all means, shout out Sleep Optimizer because it's a really well-rounded formula.
Yeah.
Or do you want to do that? Or you want me to do that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought I'd give you the honor, but that's just fine. So Sleep Optimizer, right? It's one of the things that we've formulated, and it's really, if we see somebody that has really suboptimal sleep genetics, right? It really is one of those ones that impacts the nervous system. So it's got things like ashwagandha in there, right? If you're one of these people that wakes up in the middle of the night, a lot of the times, I mean, that has to do with cortisol fluctuations, like we talked about, blood sugar kind of being raised up in the middle of the night. So that's a really important ingredient that we have there. Things like holy basil, these are really good, just adaptogenic ingredients that have effects on the nervous system as well as like emotional regulation, etc. So it's one of those things, the L-theanines, the ones that are actually hashed out in the science as well, because there's a lot of ingredients that are not hashed out in the science. But Sleep Optimizer is one of those ones that's got only the right doses and only the actual hashed out ingredients. And I have used both, honestly. I really like Deep Calm because, like, I'm a Kava nerd as well. But as far as nervous system and just getting you into those deeper states and helping it so that you don't easily wake up in the middle of the night. If you're one of those people, I would say that that's one of the better supplements to give a try. I think we have a discount code tonight, do we not?
We do. We do. And the discount code is drumroll SUP10, SUPP10, and that will give you 10% off. I'll be playing any supplement within the Black Label line. Yeah. And so Vanny or Katie will toss that information into the chat. Yeah. All right. Awesome catch there, Dr. Steady. Okay. So our first question is coming from Robin. And Robin, I hope you're hearing this on the replay because I appreciate that you had to jump. Um, so Robin is asking what genes are involved in clearing cortisol. So within the DNA 360, creating, modulating cortisol, many, many, many different factors. We don't look at all of them. Two of those that we do look at, CYP34A, 3A4, so close, 3A4. This is principally found within your sex steroid hormone section of the DNA 360, and it's part of the cytochrome P450 family, and this will be part of that clearance. So having quicker quicker enzymes here, while that may be deleterious to a certain extent for estrogen, can be very helpful for cortisol. Remember, everything comes in balance. And what else you want to be looking at, and this is also going to be in the sex steroid hormone section, is going to be your UGT2B 15 and 17. These are part of the processes of helping to clear out certain things. And so the copy number variation for 2B1717, as well as the allelic presentation for 2B15, the quicker you have there, again, the quicker you're going to be clearing those. But remember, there's a lot of different elements there. Cortisol is really important to body, especially in the morning hours. So it's something that you, well, I think it's very popular to want to completely eliminate cortisol. Be mindful, part of the reason that Justin gets up and has his happy little morning routine is to ensure that there's a happy cortisol spike there. So remember, the goal is not to completely eliminate it because we evolved with it for a reason. So just being mindful of that. Dr. Study, Justin, did you want to toss anything onto that one?
Yeah, I'll quickly say that like I am a really big fan of doing cortisol testing to really figure out what your HPA axis function looks like because I'll tell you, I've actually done that in the past and was under a period of significant stress and I actually had pretty low cortisol production. Like it was not really, it was barely making the grade. And that showed me that I had to change a bunch of stuff around because that's what's considered a compensatory phase, right? So when you're under a lot of stress, you have like an acute phase where the body's pumping out lots and lots of cortisol, and that's really an appropriate response to the stress load that you're under. If you're under the same amount of stress and it's been a while and now the cortisol is low, and I'm talking all four measurements low, barely making the grade, that means that there is HPA axis dysfunction, and lowering your cortisol is the last thing on the planet that you want to do, right? So that's where we tailor. Like I wouldn't recommend doing one of those routes that helps to really clear cortisol quicker. Your body's not making enough of it, right? Or it's shunting too much of it into cortisone, and you're not getting the response that you actually need. So cortisol testing, and I mean doing it properly, where it's a saliva test and it's 4 times, that's going to give you the best snapshot there. You don't necessarily want to be low across the board, to Dr. K's point, right? There's a time when we want it to be high, first thing in the morning. That's what gets you up. It gives you the blood sugar. There's a reason for cortisol. Cortisol is anti-inflammatory. Cortisol can save your life. Like we need cortisol, but there's a rhythm, a very specific
Mm.
rhythm going on here. We can't have elevated cortisol and elevated melatonin at the same time. One's going to counteract the other. So you want it to be high in the morning, and each measurement should be dropping, 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 reaching its lowest point about 12 hours after you get up, right? So if it spikes, in the 8 a.m. for you, you want by 8 p.m. for it to be really dropping low there because that's what's going to give rise to your three most anabolic hormones, that being the melatonin, testosterone, growth hormone, etc. So know your levels, right? And it's something that I recommend testing more than once a year so you can get a good understanding of what the HPA axis is doing in your body.
Mhm. Gorgeous. Thank you. All right. And Sheila, Sheila, you had a similar question. So I believe we captured the answer in addressing that first one. Echo has a question for us. What are the impacts of the different allelic presentations of the clock gene? So I think we roughly alluded to kind of the optimal as a morning as the night owl presentation. As a night owl, I would say I don't think it's suboptimal. It's just different. But Dr. Steady, perhaps maybe do you want to kind of speak to the different presentations of clock there and what that can mean for audience?
Yes. So the what we consider to be the optimal would be the TT. I'm assuming we want to get into the specifics here.
Sure.
And then the CC is the one where your circadian rhythm is the most impacted by that particular. But then I mean, how bad can it be? Look at these guys, they're great. So, but you may, depending on your other genetics, you could have more of a, I'm exhausted, but I'm kind of wired. That feeling that can be really uncomfortable for people sometimes, I think. So when handled well, it just means you're a night person and that you, and things like that. But if it's not managed well, then it can create some problems for people.
Maybe. All right. Um, so, Justin, I think this question is for you. Which genes impact vitamin D? Do you want to talk through our suite of vitamin D genes?
Yeah, so it's a whole pathway, right? And it really is a hormone, and it's one of those things that gets manufactured in the body. It's going to be a hormetic pathway much more than like a nutritional pathway. You're not going to be eating a lot of a lot of vitamin D. So it's like the body makes it and then it delivers it and then it accepts it into the receptors. So it's kind of a three-stage process. And the first stage is what really converts the inactive D2 into the active D3. D2 is a precursor, right? It's not something that gets
Mm.
actively used by the cells. It has to be converted, just like lots of stuff in the body. So the thing that does that is one of the cytochrome P450 genes, like Dr. K was talking about with the steroid hormones. It's called CYP1A2. No, this is where it gets so difficult. CYP2R1. That's the
There you
one.
go. Letters,
CYP1A2 is,
numbers.
yeah, CYP1A2 is like caffeine ingestion and different things. So CYP2R1, that's what does that first stage. It takes the D2 and it converts it into the D3. So once it's activated now and it's in the D3 format, then the second gene takes over, and that's called GCVDBP. That's vitamin D binding protein. And I just describe it as the Uber that takes the now active D3 to the receptor site, right? So this really speaks to dosing protocols and things as
Mm.
well, because if this is a suboptimal gene, it's an Uber that has 2 seats in it, and you can't cram 10 people into 2 seats, right? You got to send more Ubers. So this speaks to how we really go about the dosing protocol once we have your genetic information on hand. So GCVDBP takes it to the receptor site. And then the third one is, like I mentioned, VDR, vitamin D receptor. And the way I describe this is it's a bouncer at a nightclub, right? And he's the one in charge of letting things in or saying no. And some people's bouncer is like a hard ass. Like he's not letting people in all at once. He's going to be selective. And that's when you have a suboptimal presentation. And other people, the bouncer is texting and he's messing around. He's just like, yeah, get in there, get in there. It's all good. Go have a good time. So knowing the presentation there speaks once again to the protocol, because if you have a
Mhm.
suboptimal receptor now, we can't do 10,000 IUs at once. We probably can't do
Mm.
5,000 IUs at once, right? We got to send more people into that lineup, and ultimately more of them are going to end up in the nightclub.
Mhm. All right. And so Robin has a bit of a follow-up question, Justin, for you, um, saying that they don't convert that first gene that you talked about, CYP2R1, and they don't convert D2 to D3 very well. Does the sun help them at all?
The sun helps you, right? It's still going to do it. When you have that first stage of the process being suboptimal, it's just going to be a decreased ability of your body to convert D2 to active D3. And it's really a protective mechanism, right? So if you were a roofer living in Mexico or something like that, well, you don't actually want rapidly activating vitamin D in the body, right? There is such thing as vitamin D toxicity. So when we have, quote, suboptimal vitamin D genes in a different circumstance, or perhaps in, your ancestors' circumstance, it might have been something that was actually quite protective to the body, right? If you're just constantly getting bombarded with sun and it's rapidly turning it into vitamin D3, then that can manifest as toxicity. So it's going to reduce the effects when you have suboptimal for that first step there, the CYP2R1. But what I would say is that it doesn't make it a waste of time, right, to be getting sun exposure. That's still one of your primary intakes there. We don't want to be the people that just do everything in that supplement format and we never address the hormetic pathway. Morning sunshine can still kick off your circadian rhythms because all of our mitochondria understand photons of light and spectrums of light. It's still great if you have suboptimal clock, right? Because it's still going to tell your body what time of day it is. It increases nitric oxide, which is fantastic. If you have a suboptimal NOS3 gene that we look at, then you're going to want a couple of interventions in place to increase nitric oxide, and it's going to do that. I think it's healthy to just have a little base suntan year round. I mean, it's
Mm.
still useful for you. It's just that if that first step is suboptimal, you're probably going to need the support of the supplements, because you don't really see supplements in D2 format. It's already activated. You get D3 for the most part. So, not a waste of time. However, you're going to need some extra support there.
Yeah, thanks. Um, Dr. Steady, I have a question coming up for you, but before I do that, within the chat, Ashley a few times has asked the question, is your chronotype changeable? So chronotype kind of being roughly that morning bird versus night owl picture. And Ashley, the answer is yes. By and large, lifestyle will and does determine your sleep patterns. So, for example, I have a day job, which means I don't get to indulge and be a night owl. And so, what that does mean is I just have to be very, very strict around when I go to bed and when I wake up and kind of stimulants before bed, because I will very easily tip from my circadian rhythm. But even though I do not like it, I can be a morning bird, and so can you. Just like conversely, if you have a morning bird and they have job requirements or whatever it is that need them to be a shift a little bit later in the day, they can. The biggest thing, audience, I want you to take home is the consistency of the wake up and the falling asleep. That support of the rhythm. Those tend to be the two anchors. Your body loves to be the same, it loves to be boring. So if you always have those same 2 points, you can easily and to a degree comfortably achieve whatever chronotype you want. Yeah, just when you go on vacation, then you're staying up all hours of the night. All right, Dr. Steady, and the next question I have for you, it's from Lucy. Lucy has looked within her DNA 360, the hormone section, and is estrogen dominant. And they were wondering how this affects your sleep. Lucy, perhaps in the chat as well, if you want to toss in your age, only we will be able to see it. But Dr. Steady, how does estrogen in particular, someone who has an estrogen dominant profile, how does that influence?
Estrogen is one of those things. Thank you, Lucy. I caught that in the chat. Estrogen is one of those things that you don't want too little of necessarily or too much of for sleep. And if you are someone who has a lot of aromatase activity due to your CYP19A1 gene, you could end up in an estrogen dominant place. Likewise, if you are of a certain age and your progesterone levels drop, which happens to many people during perimenopause, you could end up, even if you have a less or regular amount of aromatase activity, you could still end up estrogen dominant because it's relative to progesterone. And so if you have, once again, if you have too little, it's not great for your sleep. And if you have too much, it's not great for your sleep. And if you have too much of it relative to progesterone, it's not too great. It's not great for your sleep.
Mm. Gorgeous. Thank you. And Lucy, we have a lot of conversations in particular for your age range around estrogen dominance. And so we'll make sure that we toss some of those in the chat for you. Um, Sheila, Sheila has our next question. What genes do we need to determine our melatonin production or lack thereof? The main one that we look at really is going to be the clock, and it's not necessarily responsible, again, for the production per se. I think there's a lot of diet and a lot that has to do with serotonin and a few other things that go into that. But specific to melatonin and how your body has access to it. Clock is a big orchestrator there. Again, those with that optimal profile have that consistent flow. Those with the less have a much more sensitive flow. So that would be one of the first places I'd want to look towards, right? And then kind of the conversation around gut health and nutrition, because so much of this is done within the gut. And so ensuring there's support there alongside stress. Because I think often it's external factors that will blunt or shift production or how it's going to be offered out throughout the body. So I hope that was helpful, Sheila. Justin, sir, I have a question for you, or Echo does. Echo is asking, can you discuss the impact of EMFs on sleep genes and sleep architecture?
Yeah, so that's a rabbit hole of rabbit holes, that one, and it's difficult to actually find real data on it. And I'm of the opinion that certain companies probably don't actually want some of that information coming out there as to the potential, impacts on inflammation and different things that I believe EMF can create. What it does seem to do is be a stimulator of sympathetic activity in the body, right? Because the waves are so tight and they can actually make it so that your brain has difficulty getting into the lower states like theta and delta, these different states that are associated with sleep. One of the things that it can also do is it can interfere with things like communication between the different microbiota in the gut, right? So there's, when you have your laptop right on your stomach and different things, I mean, there's some evidence that would suggest that it can be disruptive there. I don't believe that the science is perfectly hashed out, but as a practitioner, I always work on some level of EMF mitigation with people because I do think that it can make it so that your brain is kind of always hovering in that little bit more anxious state because of the sympathetic nervous system activation. And it just makes it harder for you to transition into that parasympathetic state. Usually, EMF devices are also paired with blue light, right? So I think between the two of those, it's definitely one of those disruption mechanisms. So I recommend taking a couple of steps if you can to protect yourself from it. I notice a difference there when it comes to my sleep quality, as well as the numbers on my Aura ring. That's why shout out to Leela Quantum. I've got this thing around my neck almost all the time. I don't wear it in the shower and I don't wear it when I sleep because it can actually have some energizing effects, but it's close enough to me to have that positive effect. So I'm a fan of just having a couple things in place. Aries Tech is a great company. Leela Q is a great company. There's things that you can do to help mitigate that. To me, it's really just one of those things that activates sympathetic activity. And I look at everything through the lens of epigenetic input. If we have foreign signals that the body doesn't necessarily recognize or know what to do with, it's going to basically impact your gene expression on some level or another because everything does. There's not one thing that doesn't impact genetic expression that we encounter throughout the day. And that's one of the ones that we're pretty much bombarded with, right? My laptop's 2 feet away from me right now. So it's definitely impacting me on some level. Ladies, do you have any input on that? I know that the science itself isn't entirely hashed out of yet.
Yeah. Dr. Study?
Not really.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I have yet to see a case where it is root cause. That said, I've seen a few cases in particular within the chronic illness space where it was a contributing cause and mitigation of it was exceptionally helpful. So that tends to be, I think it's very valuable to be considered and worked with, especially in kind of a more sensitive Sally gene or health presentation. Yeah. All right. Dr. Steady, I have a question for you from Marty. Marty's asking, they see that their 5-HTT LPR is an LL, but they don't really know what that means in terms of that presentation as well as how they sleep. So for the benefit of the audience, Dr. Study, why don't you kind of detail what that is? And then both presentations so audience kind of has something to juxtapose against.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
But first,
first.
The talk of hormones reminded me that we have a summit coming up on Saturday, which is all about menopause. So for any of you who may be in that age group or know someone who is, and you all know someone who is 100%, feel free to join us on Saturday for that. It'll be very exciting. Okay, now let's get into five.
And I would actually just to pause, I really do want to say that age group is unfortunately getting younger and younger and younger, and we are going to talk about perimenopause happening in younger populations. So unfortunately, even though we want to think of, the 40, like the 45 plus crowd, I'd offer it's probably beneficial to the 35 plus crowd. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. So, ladies on the call are people that want to support the females in your life. We are talking all things hormone replacement, breast cancer, pelvic floor health, as well as that psychosocial transition. I'm really, really excited for it. We have cooking classes, we have exercise classes. It is going to be a delightful little day. Dr. Steady, you wonderfully are going to be talking there too.
And we'll be there to watch everybody else, and I'm very excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Yeah.
Back to 5-HTT LPR.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is a mouthful. So the LL presentation, long, is more efficient at both secreting and reabsorbing serotonin. And that wouldn't be the one that I would associate with it affecting sleep necessarily. It would be more the SS, the short, that would be more the presentation, or the LS, even the long short, someone could have yeah, because the S is dominant. So it would be basically the same. So if you're LL, no worries. If you have either of the other two, you may want to be taking that into consideration when you are going about your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Thank you. All right. Robin is saying, and this is in regards to some supplementation. Um, Robin took some GABA, 100 milligrams, and slept much more deeply. So they benefited in terms of health the sleep, but they didn't feel great when they woke up. They almost went to the ER. It took about an hour to stop kind of this very uncomfortable sensation, the dizziness. And so while this is offered as a statement, I think it's prone time to, ensure that supplementation often does work, but you do need to be taking it under the guidance of a healthcare. And so while we really do encourage you to our marketplace to explore our supplements, you've heard that both the Deep Calm and the Sleep Up are beautifully designed and very helpful to these end. Always make sure you're checking in with the doctor when you go about this. And I think we've put the discount code again for audience members in the chat there. Yeah. Any other comments around Robin's experience there? I know we've all seen that where someone with a good intention took a supplement and it didn't feel great.
Yeah, I think GABA also in particular is one of those ones that has a bit of difficulty with the blood-brain barrier when
Mm.
taken by itself, like as the actual extract. So, to me, like I mentioned, kava is a great alternative because it operates on the pathway, but it's not taking milligrams of the actual, nutrient itself. So sometimes you can impact the GABA pathway with different stuff that isn't actually taking like 100 milligram dose of the actual, ingredient. So it's a pathway. It's important to remember that. And it's a pathway that can be stimulated with other things than taking the ingredient itself. And that usually has less likelihood of like, severe downsides, right? Like if you just take something that kind of stimulates the pathway, usually you're going to have less effect. Like if you take kava and it's real kava, you're probably not going to wake up the next day feeling like that. You're probably going to feel pretty good. So just know that it doesn't really actively cross the blood-brain barrier. And I remember one time I even did this. There's a company called Newcom, and it's kind of an alternative to Brain Tap. But one of the interesting things that they do is they have this little disc. It's like a GABA disc, and you put it on your wrist. There's a particular location on your wrist that it actually helps to kind of like, it's almost like a transdermal effect with the GABA, right? And you can use like GABA creams and different things that will in fact get through the blood-brain barrier. So there's just different ways to do it, I suppose, as opposed to taking the raw ingredient itself. So just explore some options if you feel like it's an ingredient you need.
Yeah.
I was just
Please.
going to say some people are more sensitive to GABA than others, and some people are also really sensitive to fluctuations in it. And that's actually one of the reasons that they're theorizing that PMDD exists is because of these fluctuations in GABA as someone's cycle that's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, I believe. And so that the fluctuations in GABA are what actually can cause that. That's one of the theories. So just pointing out that people have different effects. Things can have different effects on different people. So
Yeah. And yeah, no, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. All right. Dr. Steady, I have a question for you. It's an herbalism question. It's a two-parter, so from Marianne and Shelley. Um, Marianne is asking, do you need to take a break from ashwagandha if you've been using it for several months? So maybe you want to talk as well about why ashwagandha is sometimes used for sleep. And then Shelley's asking the question, is there a best time to be taking ashwagandha, in particular if it's being used for sleep?
so ashwagandha acts as a why can I not think of this word? What is this word? It's
Adaptogen.
Thank
Adaptogen?
you. I was like, as an adaptogen. So it helps the body manage stress. It's not going to increase or decrease anything necessarily. But it's acting to help the body and support it in managing stress. And I actually do like having people take breaks from things to see uh, supplement breaks, all kinds of breaks, and maybe even pulsing things. So I would say yes, and also see where you land. And if you need it anymore, because I don't think the goal with things is necessarily that we stay on every single thing for the rest of our lives, but rather that we use some of them when they're beneficial, and then when we don't need them anymore, we stop and then can go back on them
Mm,
later. In terms of the best timing, um, some people, it can be a little energizing. And so they can't take it at night. And some people, it helps them sleep. That's just been my experience with patients, because people have,
mhm,
and some people get really super wired, and some people can feel kind of bummed out on ashwagandha. It's just one of those things that can happen. So, what I would say, sometimes people take it in divided doses so that it's not a whole bunch of it in the morning or a whole bunch of it at night, and just see how you do. And if you
mhm,
feel like your sleep is not better by taking it in the evening, try only taking it in the morning. I think there's a level of experimentation, and I unfortunately don't know you. So, although we'd like to know all of you, I can't really speak to what would be best for you specifically.
mhm. Gorgeous. Love it. All right, Justin, sir, I have a question for you. Renee is asking if you can go over whether vitamin D is a hormone or lot, and additional to that, in particular, when you're supplementing, is it energizing?
Yeah, so it's considered a hormone because it really meets the criteria of a hormone. Like I mentioned, it's one of those things that's actually synthesized and created in the body, right? So the body uses cholesterol. It's got this process, different enzymes transform it and turn it into something that really acts as a hormone on the body. And it happens to be a hormone that has like 10,000 plus uses in the body, right? A lot of implication when it comes to inflammation, things like gut health, things like immune health, things like circadian rhythm. There's so many different things that vitamin D is doing. We call it vitamin D because hormone D sounds weird, right? It's like we
Mm,
have to continue to call it vitamin D because that's sort of how the supplement industry has marketed it. And I would say that, yeah, I would consider it to be something that's relatively energizing. It's not something that's going to have like a stimulant effect or anything like that, but consider the mechanism and consider what we're talking about here. We're talking about a sunshine activated hormone in the body. Cholesterol gives your body energy, sunshine gives your body energy. There's a relationship between these two. And vitamin D, aka hormone D, is definitely one of those things that can be energizing. It's just that it's not going to like stimulate your adrenals or something like that, right?
mm,
It's not energizing in that sense. But that's part of the reason why I say don't take it too late in the day, because, yeah, if it gets its way into that receptor, that VDR that I mentioned, and it's midnight, then, yeah, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to fall asleep because of the energizing properties. So, yeah, hormone D, maybe we'll change the name.
mm. Great. All right, and I think the last question that we have here from Michael is they and Justin, maybe if you would just want to offer a little bit of clarity to this. They're not clear as to if you're taking D3, that then skips the conversion, or it skips that first gene that we spoke of, the enzyme of the first gene that we spoke of, CYP2R1. So do you want to talk a little bit about, again, D2 to D3 and D3 supplementation?
Absolutely. It's pretty rare that you're going to find supplement forms of D2. I mean, I've seen the odd like vitamin D complex out there where it's actually got some D2 and to provide you with the precursor. But the thing is, like 99% of supplements are going to be in D3 format, and it's exactly what it says. You're getting it in the already converted form, right? So when you take your supplements, you don't necessarily have to consider that first gene because you're already getting it in that converted format. It's just like if you were to take a beta carotene supplement, well, that's the precursor to active vitamin A. So we have another gene called BCMO1 that does that conversion. And for some people, you're going to need the retinol form. If you take the retinol form, well, we've cut out that enzymatic process or the need for that enzymatic process, and you're getting it in the format that the body's going to be able to actively use it. So same thing with D3. It's already converted. It's in its active form. Now we just got to worry about GC, the delivery, and VDR, the actual receptorship there. So yeah,
Perfect.
a lot going on with that vitamin D. And by the way, I mentioned nitric oxide. Nitric oxide helps to sort of free up internally stored vitamin D as well. There's K2 to consider. There's other cofactors like magnesium to consider. So I have like a whole conversation about vitamin D with clients because it's not just a one and done thing usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. So, friends, we have gone over a lot this evening. Audience, I can appreciate we've touched on so many different things, and we kind of foretold that because we said that sleep can be disrupted by 1,000 different cuts. And so we will absolutely be having a replay of this. So just keep in your inbox, and you'll be able to see the linking to that replay so that you can hear all these little tidbits. And I hope you can appreciate that how important it is to have a 360, because there's never going to be this one, well, rarely, sometimes, but rarely is there ever just one thing. It tends to be a lot of little things. And so if you're ever looking towards support for implementing these things or figuring out how to do it, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love to work with people and support that. Dr. Steady, Justin, any closing words of wisdom for our audience? Because I again appreciate we've offered them so many little gems. How do you suggest people take one or two of these gems and bring it into their life?
I think that the holistic nature of what we're talking about is the main thing to pay homage to here. It's not a
Mm,
one gene equals this and it's not a one symptom equals that. It's really a holistic thing. This is one of those primary pillars of the body and how the body regulates anabolic and catabolic processes. And that we don't want to be too anabolic and we don't want to be too catabolic. This is an ebb and flow thing that happens in the body, a diurnal rhythm, right? We're not nocturnal, maybe Dr. Koshman a little bit, but for the most part, we're diurnal, right? And we need to have both of those yin and yang properties in the body. If you're not getting enough sleep, then you're going to have health problems. I know that in the West, we're obsessed with motivation culture and we're all type A and we just want to get after it and grind at both ends. But understand, you're going to run into problems if you don't pay homage to it. Even if diet is perfect, supplements are perfect, all of the above, this is a pillar and you have to pay massive respect to it. And every aspect of your performance and your health and longevity is going to thank you for that. So get some sleep, folks. I mean, that's one of my main pieces of health advice.
Not much needs to be added to that, I don't think. But what I will say is there is sometimes uh, mythology out there that not sleeping well is part of X, Y, and Z. It's part of aging. It's
mm,
part of menopause. It's part of being a parent. It's part of whatever. And it doesn't have to be. So if you're not sleeping, try to get some more sleep. Ask for help when you need it, and work on it.
yeah. Amazingness. So, audience, from our hearts to yours, we hope you sleep. But before we hope you sleep, we are going to dance out of here because, audience, when we look at exercise, it is the best thing you can do for your mental health. And when asked what exercise is best for that, it is dancing. So we dance out every time. We hope if you're not too close to bed that you want to dance out with us. If you're close to bed, don't even listen to the music that's going to come on as we jazz out of here. All right, audience, until tomorrow evening, au revoir et merci. Thank you so very much. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Dr. Steady. Thanks, Justin. Au revoir.
Bye, everybody. Have a good evening.
There we go. Annie. This was great dance face.
Bye.